Happy Friday, everyone. I hope we're live. It looks like we're trying to go live. There we are. Well, happy Friday, everyone. Or maybe we should say good Friday, everyone. Uh, Hope you've had a great week and are ready for your weekend. And let's start it off with another chapter of Book One, which is called Lamb of God, of Accidental Christ, the story of Jesus as told by his uncle. Once again, it is available on Kindle uh, because at the moment the first edition is prohibitively expensive from private collectors. So don't even think about it. Go for the Kindle. The biblical or the scriptural epigram for this one is from Ezra 1, chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms on earth, and he has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which city is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? His God be with him. Let him go to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house to the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And in the printed book, we've got Julianne's Sumii little drawing of four people bowing down prostrate. Chapter 4. Jesus remained a little over 6 weeks at the house of Clopas, where he was assailed each day from dawn to midnight with the details of nearly 300 years of scriptural history, politics, and religion. Clopas was especially obsessed with the complexities of Jesus' bloodline. The walls of his study were festooned with 5 different versions of family trees of Joseph and no less than 16 of Mary's. You are the true vine, my boy, and your father was the last master gardener. Your blood is the rarest fruit of our race. You are a star fixed in the heavens of our people. When the news of your birth reached the diaspora in Persia, they dispatched a party to verify your lineage. Can you imagine how upset Great Herod became when the Magians came to ask him, asking to see who was born king of the Jews? He knew then and there that he'd lost support of the cults. With that slap in the face, what a slap in the face for that old flatulent. Almost cost us our lives, too. As you can tell, Clopas is my favorite character in this story. In the weeks that followed, Clopas introduced Jesus to scores of Confederates and fellow travelers, all of whom treated him as if he were already anointed and crowned. Then, early one morning, he met a very different kind of conspirator, one who would forever change the way he would think of himself. Jesus, wake up. It was still dark. The voice was that of his Aunt Mary, who stood at his chamber door with an olive oil lamp. Jesus wiped dreams of Egypt from his eyes. We have a very important guest who wants to meet you. Dress quickly and meet your uncle in the study. She then turned and disappeared down the narrow hall, taking the light with her. An important guest? At this time of night? Jesus grumbled to himself as he groped in the darkness for his robe. Once dressed, he drowsily stumbled down the dark hallway, bouncing every few steps against one wall and then the other. Nearing the study, he was startled to see two temple soldiers standing in the doorway. Upon his approach, they stood shoulder to shoulder to bar his entry. "Please, let him pass." From behind them, Clopas tried to shout and whisper at the same time. The soldiers fell back into the study and cleared a path. Clopas stood in his night garment, his hair so disheveled he appeared insane. "Jesus, dear boy, there is someone who would like to, there's someone I want you to meet." Clopas was uncharacteristically flustered. Jesus was frightened into full consciousness. The man sitting across the table from Clopas was dressed in costly riding clothes and smelled of a horse that had been ridden hard. He was large, but not as plump as Clopas. His face was covered from the nose down with the chin flap of his turban. "You looked frightened." The mask had a voice. The masked face had a voice. "Were you not taught to be fearless?" "Of course you were. One such as you does not dread life, for he knows there is no dread after life." This illusion told Jesus he was in the presence of a fellow perfect master, and the key conspirator of whom the abbot had spoken in whispers. Clopas ventured to speak again. "My boy, may I introduce Joseph of Ramtha, the lord of our community and a counselor to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem." Joseph stood up and uncovered his face. He appeared to be in his mid-60s, a full head shorter than Jesus. His face was a brownish gray like lentil paste, and he showed a scattering of darker spots that appear with age. His dark gray beard disappeared under the neck of his garment, and his eyebrows jutted forward like awnings, sheltering two sparkling dark black orbs. Jesus thought they looked like hawk eyes. Jesus began to speak when, to the wonder of all in the room, this imposing figure dropped slowly to his knees, then fell completely prostrate on the floor before the feet of Jesus. "Your servant, Jesus ben Joseph ben Heli, King of the Jews." After a moment of confused hesitation, all in the room did likewise, including Clopas, who had considerable difficulty getting up again. At first, Jesus thought he was being mocked. He felt uneasy and embarrassed and insisted that everyone get off the floor and take their seats. Once settled, Joseph spoke, quietly and with great deliberation. "Soon the sun will rise. When it does, I would like you to climb to the roof of this house. As far as you'll be able to see in every direction is the province of my family. I am the wealthiest man in northern Judea. For 170 years, members of my family have served selflessly on all levels of commerce, religion, and politics. Do you want to know how we have kept our wealth and position throughout generations of civil strife and foreign occupation? Because you have collaborated Jesus surprised himself with this audacious reply. Clopas stirred uncomfortably. Joseph answered with a cold glower that caused Jesus to look away. Yes, we collaborate. He stood up and walked to the window. He stroked his eyes with both hands as if he were trying to rub images from his mind onto his lips. God's chosen ones are a stiff-necked people. He teases us with covenants he will never have to honor because he knows we are too human to realize his ideals. So he punishes us. He scourges us with many rods. He gives us land, then he blesses our enemies who take it from us. He delivers us unto bondage, then permits us to return to become slaves within our own borders. Yes, Jesus ben Joseph, you are correct. With us, collaboration is an art form, an exercise of worship. First, we collaborate with a God for whom punishment is a token of love. Then we collaborate with the very instruments of his wrath. We wallow in our woe. We are more self-indulgent in our suffering than the pain worshippers of Corinth who ejaculate only after torture. Forgive my insolence, Lord Joseph, Jesus said. I too grieve for the crippled soul of the children of Israel. Why then should any of us wish to shed our blood to perpetrate such wholesale mental illness? Joseph turned and looked at Clopas and broke into a broad smile. Great is the monarch who would spurn a kingdom of fools. The room exploded with such laughter the horses tethered outside near the windows reared and snorted. Joseph returned to his seat and drew it closer to Jesus. You are a well-educated man. I have no doubt you are aware that the kingdoms of David and Solomon, if they existed at all, bore little semblance to the scriptural accounts. We both know that much of what is believed to have been the golden age of ancient Israel is fiction, a fantasy spun by the melancholy poets of the Babylonian captivity to bring hope to the diverse captives of that cruel era. When great Cyrus conquered Babylon, he found it necessary to rid himself of our ancestors and the legions of other slaves Nebuchadnezzar had captured in his foreign campaigns. After 2 generations, our forefathers had become an economic burden. Uncle Clopas laughingly interjected. Joseph did not acknowledge the interruption. Darius, Cyrus's successor, feared a cultural collapse if he were to continue to integrate this throng into Babylonian society, and he certainly didn't want to bring them to Persia. So he labored with the holy man Nehemiah and the scribe Ezra to devise a history for these poor souls. To give them a future, it was first necessary to provide them a past. To explain the diversity of languages and customs, they were told that each group sprang from one of the 12 distinct tribes of mythical Hebrews. Thus was Moses drawn not from the bulrushes of the Nile, but from the imagination of good men who would free a people that possessed no cultural memory whatsoever. The children of the captivity embraced this vision with great fervor and believed with all their hearts that they were the children of the mythical patriarchs. To further bolster their new identity, Darius told them they were free to go back home and gave them a part of the world that was united by no king and defended by no army. He gave them Palestine, if they promised to immediately leave Babylon. There was indeed an exodus, but it was not from Egypt. Uncle Clopas cleared his throat and stood up. It was obvious that he had rehearsed what he was about to say. He delivered his words with the accentuation of a schoolmaster. Simply put, my lords, our magnificent religion and the nations of Israel and Judea are children of a dream, the bizarre consequence of expedient Persian politics. Jesus knew what these men said was true. All of the cults, Carmelites had no delusions concerning the secret history of the faith. The room remained silent for a moment. Then Joseph of Ramtha spoke. However, you, my lord, are real. You're both real and fantasy. History and myth unite in your blood. You are not only a real king, but king of a dream, the rightful heir to a kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. But surely there have been others in the past who could have been put forth as king, Jesus protested. My grandfather, Heli, or my father. Ah, that's where you're wrong. Clopas came to life and jumped to his feet. Your mother's blood holds the key. See here. Carrying a lamp to the wall of family trees, he nervously pointed to one side and then the other. Whether they existed or not in flesh, the scribe Ezra gave us David and Solomon and the family trees in abundance. These here prove you to be the preeminent scion of both houses without question. Hey, follow the streams of blood from David and Saul. They have nearly touched only 3 times, most recently in your grandfather Heli and your cousin John. But because of the unique and fortunate grafting of both of your parents, sires, and dams, they merge in you. They merge. Listen to me. The branches are grafted to the root of the tree. Shun Benjamin's womb carries great David's seed. It is as if King Saul wedded King David and gave birth to you. These trees were reviewed and approved by the Magians when you were born. See here their seals. The charts over here trace your ancestry back from Solomon to David to Abraham to Adam. These others cast by the temple genealogists who calculated your descent from Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canoth, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Araxphar, Canaan, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Arau, Serug, Nahor, Terah, Abraham, and on to you. The high priest Zechariah himself reviewed these charts. See here his seal. No, listen to me. There has only been one like you, only one. But what about my brother James? James is but the second fruit of your parents' loins, answered Clopas. I understand there's a controversy surrounding the circumstances of my birth. It is true, is it not, that I was conceived during the betrothal period? Even my cousin John calls me a bastard. Yes, Joseph snapped. He drew in his breath and held it as if he were reluctant to speak. Yes, in the eyes of a few of the most conservative elements of our movement, there is a shadow upon your nativity. In keeping with the marriage protocol of the sect to which your mother and father belonged, your conception was lawful and your birth legitimate. However, according to the complex and archaic breeding regulations of other cults, your conception took place in the months after the betrothal period, but before the wedding was finalized. In their eyes, your mother was legally a virgin, and you are a bastard that should have been exposed at death. Exposed at birth. I'm getting ahead of myself. Joseph of Ramtha continues. I will be frank with you. It is true. If the coup were to take place today, some of the leaders of these cults would hasten to recognize your brother James, but not you. But the coup is not taking place today. It will take at least 3 years before we strike. And in that time, I assure you that these superstitious old pharaohs will no longer be a threat to anyone. It is Jesus, not James, who has been educated and initiated and groomed for kingship. It is through the veins of Jesus that the mythical blood of David and Saul first flowed in our generation. My blood is no holier than that of the leper that sits outside the city gate, Jesus scoffed. That is true, said Joseph, but it will dissolve the throne of Herod's like vitriolic acid. If we can keep the various factions and cults off balance until your ascension, they will race each other to be the first to receive your royal blessing. Unlike the Herodians, who have kept their puppet power by fomenting feuds, you will wield the full force of a united theocracy. Rome will be forced to negotiate a more reasonable accord, and you will certainly be a reasonable king. The tone of Joseph's voice changed with these words. He leaned over and placed his hand on Jesus' hand and pressed down for emphasis. I know for a fact that Rome is weary of tying up her legions to hold this land of dust and scorpions. She dreams nostalgically of the days of Herod the Great and relishes the idea of a stable regime. She would be ready to view the ruler of such a nation more as an ally than a subject. Joseph stood up and covered his face with the chin flap of his turban. So you see, my lord, just by being who you are, you will create the Jewish kingdom and save the world. Jesus sat speechless. Joseph signaled the two soldiers to ready the horses. It is late. I see your uncle is ready for breakfast. I'm sure you have a lot to think about. I'll meet you again at your mother's home in Cana. Jesus rose to accept the masked kisses of the nobleman and struggled to say something. Nothing came out. When they had gone, he returned to his bed and fell into a fitful sleep. And that's the end of that chapter. I hope you'll join us over the weekend and after that as we work our way through this my only novel. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Have a great weekend, everyone.